The Perseids weren't supposed to hit this hard. I'm saying that like I'm some kind of astronomer, which I'm not. I'm a security contractor for Cheyenne Mountain, which means I check badges and make sure generals don't prop open blast doors with folding chairs. Has happened. Twice. But I've worked here 6 years, and you pick things up. Meteor showers are common. The mountain's designed for nuclear strikes. A few space rocks shouldn't have done anything except maybe scratch the parking lot. The first impact sounded like God dropping a wrench in a cathedral. I was in the commissary getting my third coffee, the Folgers stuff that tastes like they filtered it through a gym sock, when the whole complex shuddered. Not earthquake shudder. Wrong frequency. Higher pitch. Like the mountain itself had hiccuped. Lieutenant Sarah Friel looked up from her tablet at the next table, and I caught her eye. We'd worked enough graveyard shifts together to have that wordless, "Did you feel that?" communication down. Probably just blasting at the Pike National Forest expansion, I said, which was stupid because they don't blast at 0340 hours. I was already moving toward the nearest comm station when the second impact hit. This one was different. Deeper. The overhead fluorescents flickered. They're supposed to be on independent backup. Been here since the Cold War, never flicker. And somewhere in the tunnel network I heard metal screaming. Not bending. Screaming. Sarah was on her feet, tablet forgotten. That came from the north entrance shaft, which is 500 feet of solid granite between us and outside. I said, but I was already punching my security code into the wall panel. My hands were shaking. Partly adrenaline, partly because I'd already had 2 coffees and the caffeine was hitting wrong. Command, this is Bannister, Sector 7. We've got impacts, possible structural compromise. Requesting status check on north entrance. The comm system made a sound like a cat dying in a blender, then went silent. Sarah grabbed my shoulder. Cole, look at the lights. The fluorescents were still flickering, but now they had company. The emergency strips were activating. Not the regular amber, something's broken color. The deep red ones. The ones that mean the mountain thinks it's under nuclear attack and is sealing itself up like a tomb. That's a false positive, I said, because it had to be. Meteor impacts triggering the seismic sensors, systems compensating for. The third impact cut me off. This time I felt it through my boots, through the reinforced concrete, through the steel-reinforced tunnel walls that were supposed to withstand direct Soviet ICBM strikes. The mountain moved. Mountains don't move. And then I smelled it. You ever burn plastic by accident? Not like melting a water bottle near a campfire. I mean really burn it. Industrial-grade polymers breaking down into chemical compounds that make your eyes water. That smell, but wronger. Sweeter underneath. Like someone had mixed motor oil with vanilla extract and set it on fire. Sarah smelled it too. Her nose wrinkled. She did that when she was trying not to show concern, and she moved toward the commissary exit. We need to get to the command center. Something breached the outer envelope. Nothing breaches the outer envelope. That's the whole point of Cheyenne Mountain. Well, something just did. We made it maybe 30 feet down Corridor B7 before we found Captain Morris. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, just standing there in his dress blues like he was waiting for a bus. Facing the wall. Not moving. The emergency lights turned his shadow into something that stretched too far down the tunnel. Captain? Sarah's voice had that careful tone you use when you're not sure if someone's having a medical episode or just lost in thought. Sir, we need to proceed to command. There's... Morris turned around. His eyes were wrong. I'm not talking metaphorically wrong, or he looked stressed wrong. I mean physiologically, fundamentally wrong. The whites had gone grayish, and there was something moving underneath them. Not behind them, underneath. Like the capillaries had been replaced with fine black threads that were writhing around like they were looking for something. The dust, Morris said, except his voice sounded like 2 voices speaking slightly out of sync. It came through the ventilation. In the meteor. It's in the air conditioning. It's in. He lunged. I've done hand-to-hand training. Standard contractor requirement. But training is punching bags and counting points. And this was a 52-year-old Air Force captain moving like his bones had been replaced with springs. I got my forearm up in time to block his swing, felt something in my wrist crunch wrongly, and then Sarah had her taser out. The prongs hit Morris' center mass. 50,000 volts. He staggered, made a sound like a garbage disposal choking on silverware, and went down. But he was still moving, twitching, and those thread things in his eyes were spreading, creeping across his face like cracks in ice. Run, I said. What? Run. We ran. Behind us, I heard Morris get back up. I heard his footsteps, too fast, wrong rhythm, and I heard him say something in that dual-track voice about the dust getting inside, always inside, spreading through the filtration system into every tunnel, every room, every lung. Sarah pulled me into a maintenance shaft, and we slammed the hatch shut, spinning the manual lock wheel until my damaged wrist screamed. Through the small porthole window, I watched Morris's face appear, those gray eyes with their writhing black underlayers pressed against the glass. Then he smiled. Not a human smile. Something that had learned smiling from watching humans, but hadn't quite gotten the proportions right. And he walked away. "Jesus Christ," Sarah whispered. "Jesus Christ, what was that?" "I don't know. Biological? Chemical? Some kind of..." I stopped. Because I did know. It hit me like cold water. He said it came in with the meteor. In the dust. "Sarah, those weren't normal impacts. Those were delivery systems." She stared at me. "That's insane." Yeah, it is." I pulled out my radio, tried command again. Static. Tried security station Alpha. Static. Tried the civilian line that's supposed to connect to Northcom in Colorado Springs. Nothing. We were sealed inside a mountain with something that turned Air Force officers into puppets with wrong eyes, and nobody was answering the phone. Sarah's tactical mind kicked in first. That's why she made lieutenant, and I checked badges. "The Launch Control Center," she said. "If whatever this is spreads through the personnel, if it gets someone with launch authority." She didn't have to finish. Cheyenne Mountain doesn't just monitor North American air defense. It has direct links to missile silos across the western United States. Fail-safes exist, multiple redundancies, but those redundancies require human verification, human judgment, and Captain Morris hadn't looked very human anymore. "We need to reach the LCC," I said. "Secure the authentication keys before anyone infected gets there. Cole, you're a badge checker. And your intelligence analysis. Neither of us is qualified for this." I tested my wrist, winced. Probably just sprained, but it felt like someone had taken a hammer to the bones. But everyone qualified might be busy turning into whatever Morris became. "So it's us or nobody." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. I could see her doing the math, weighing options. Then she nodded. "Okay, but we're doing this smart. No heroics, no improvisation. We follow protocol." "What protocol covers alien infection?" "The one where we don't die stupidly." That seemed reasonable. We made it 3 more corridors before we found the others. There were 6 of them clustered around the entrance to the underground lake access point, the reservoir that supplies the complex's water. They were just standing there, completely still, like mannequins in a department store window. All in different uniforms, Air Force, Army, civilian contractor coveralls. All with those same gray eyes and black thread things moving underneath. "Back up," Sarah whispered. "Slowly. Don't run. Don't make sudden movements." We started backing away. All 6 heads turned in unison. "The filtration system," one of them said, a woman in Air Force digital camo whose name tape read Rodriguez. Same dual-track voice Morris had. "It's spreading optimally. 73% of personnel are integrated. The launch protocols will be accessible within 42 minutes. Launch protocols. Christ. Integrated? I said, because apparently my mouth works independently of my brain's better judgment. What the hell does that mean? Rodriguez tilted her head at an angle that would have required breaking most of the vertebrae in a normal spine. You're unintegrated. The dust hasn't reached you yet. That's acceptable. Everyone will be reached eventually. The mountain is sealed. You can't leave. And we can't let you leave either, said another one, Sergeant Friel, and I felt sick because Sarah had mentioned him before, her distant cousin who worked in communications. You might warn the others outside. That would slow the integration of the larger population. That's unacceptable. They started walking toward us. Not fast, just walking, but with perfect coordination, like they were connected to the same invisible puppeteer. Sarah grabbed my arm and yanked me backward through an unmarked door, one of the old Cold War maintenance passages that weren't on the official maps anymore. We ran through a maze of narrow tunnels, past ancient junction boxes and corroded pipes, emergency lights casting everything in bloody shadows. Behind us, I could hear them. Not running, just walking. Steady. Inevitable. Where are we going? I gasped. Service elevator shaft. Leads directly to level 5 where the LCC is. We can't take the main corridors anymore. They're between us and command. And if the elevator isn't working, then we climb. The elevator wasn't working. Of course it wasn't. Emergency power had diverted to life support and the blast door systems. The shaft disappeared upward into darkness. The emergency ladder bolted to one side, looking like it hadn't been maintained since Reagan was president. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. 5 levels. Maybe 200 feet. You climb ladders and security checks, right? Yeah, in full lighting with safety harnesses, and not while running from infected personnel with a sprained wrist. Sarah was already climbing. Then today's your lucky day for new experiences. I followed because staying at the bottom alone seemed worse. The climb was hell. Every rung sent jolts up my damaged wrist, and the darkness pressed in from all sides except for the narrow cone of Sarah's tactical flashlight pointing upward. About halfway up, we heard the service door below open. Footsteps on metal. Multiple people entering the shaft. Then silence. Then they started climbing too. "They're not talking to each other," Sarah whispered. "No communication. No coordination calls. They're just climbing. Maybe they don't need to talk. Maybe they're..." I didn't want to finish that thought. Hive mind. Shared consciousness. All those science fiction horror concepts that were supposed to stay fictional. My hand slipped. For one terrible moment I was falling, gravity pulling me down toward those steady climbing figures below, and then my good hand caught a rung, and I slammed against the ladder hard enough to knock the wind out of myself. "Cole!" Sarah was reaching down, grabbing my collar, hauling me back into position. "Stay with me. We're almost there." We weren't almost there. We were maybe 60% up, but I appreciated the lie. When we finally reached level 5 and pulled ourselves onto the access platform, my arms felt like they were full of broken glass. Sarah immediately moved to the blast door controls, entering her security code. Nothing happened. Shit. Override must have triggered when the emergency systems activated. She tried 2 more codes. Still nothing. "We need command authorization to open this from inside." And command's probably compromised. Yeah. I slumped against the wall, trying to catch my breath. So we're trapped. Either they come up behind us, or we're stuck here until the emergency protocols eventually unlock in, 72 hours? By which time everyone in the complex will be integrated, and they'll have had plenty of time to figure out the launch systems. Sarah wasn't listening. She was examining the blast door's edge, running her fingers along the seal. These doors are designed to withstand external blast pressure. But the maintenance hatches. She moved to a small panel in the adjacent wall. During construction, they needed access points for running cables and systems checks. Most got permanently sealed, but a few. She pulled out her multi-tool and started unscrewing the panel cover. "You're going to crawl through the walls of Cheyenne Mountain. We're going to crawl through the walls. You've got 30 seconds to decide if you're coming with me or taking your chances with the climbing infected people." Behind us, I heard them reaching the level below. Still climbing. Still silent. I helped her with the screws. The maintenance crawl space was never meant for people. Maybe for very small, flexible engineers back in 1966. Maybe for trained monkeys. But not for an intelligence officer and a security contractor with a sprained wrist trying to navigate 300 feet of horizontal tunnel filled with cable bundles and sharp-edged junction boxes in near-total darkness. "This is insane," I muttered for maybe the 14th time. "You mentioned that. I'm going to mention it again when we get stuck and die in here." "We're not going to die in here." Sarah's voice came from somewhere ahead in the darkness. "The LCC has redundant ventilation, which means these conduits connect directly to the control room. We get there, we secure the authentication keys, we lock down the launch systems. And then what? We're still sealed in a mountain full of infected personnel. Eventually they'll get through any door we lock. Eventually we'll run out of supplies, or they'll cut power, or figure out how to use the systems against us." Silence for a moment. Then, one problem at a time, Cole. The crawl space opened into a vertical shaft, another service duct, barely wide enough for shoulders. I could see a faint glow from above. Emergency lighting. "That's the LCC ventilation system," Sarah said. "If we can reach the main duct, there's an inspection hatch that opens directly into the control room. Security's going to love that vulnerability. Security's been dead or infected for the last hour. I don't think they're filing reports." Fair point. We climbed. Again. My wrist had gone from sharp pain to a dull throb that suggested either it was getting better or I was going into shock. Probably the latter. At the top, Sarah worked the inspection hatch open. I could hear voices beyond it, human voices, actual conversation, not that dual-track horror show. Contact with Northcom, trying backup satellites. Sierra stations reporting similar seismic events, but different impact vectors. Biohazard protocols, but we don't even know what we're dealing with. Sarah dropped through first, landing with a professional tuck and roll on the control room floor. I followed less gracefully, hitting hard and immediately regretting every life choice that led me to security contracting instead of, say, accounting. The command center was chaos. Not infected chaos. Just normal military emergency chaos. 12 people at various stations, all talking over each other, multiple screens showing red alert status across different systems. And standing at the main console, looking exhausted but still very much human, was Colonel Marcus Reeves. He spun at our entrance, hand going to his sidearm, then recognized Sarah. "Lieutenant Friel, what the hell are you doing coming through the ceiling?" "Sir, the main access corridors are compromised. We've got a biological contamination event. Personnel are being infected by some kind of microbe that came in with the meteor impacts. Captain Morris, Sergeant Friel, Rodriguez, at least 20 others I've seen. It's spreading through the ventilation system." Reeves stared at her. "That's impossible. This facility has the most advanced filtration systems in the world. Nothing biological gets through without us knowing. With respect, sir, something did. And it's not just making people sick. It's changing them, controlling them. They're coordinated, they move together, and they've specifically mentioned targeting launch protocols." The room had gone quiet. Everyone staring at us like we'd announced the moon was made of cheese. Then one of the technicians at a monitoring station said, very quietly, "Sir, I'm showing anomalous personnel movements. Multiple groups converging on the LCC's main entrances. They're not responding to comms." Reeves moved to the station, looked at the displays. His jaw tightened. "Lock it down. Seal all entrance points. And get me aligned to Northcom, Stratcom, anybody outside this mountain." "Sir, communications are down. The impacts damaged the relay stations." "Then fix them." "Sir, the relay stations are outside, in the contamination zone." Reeves closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they had the look of a man doing mathematics he really didn't want to solve. "How many infected are we talking about?" "At least 60 confirmed," I said. "Probably more by now." They said 73% of personnel were integrated. "If the complex has 200 people on duty." 146, Sarah finished. "Against 14 of us." One of the other officers spoke up. "We can hold the LCC. It's designed to withstand siege conditions. Food stores, independent life support, the whole system." "For how long?" Sarah asked. "Days? Weeks? And what happens if they figure out how to cut power or flood the ventilation with whatever's in that meteor dust?" "Then we're fucked," Reeves said flatly. "But we can't leave. And we can't let them access launch systems." He turned to Sarah and me. "You too saw Morris. You saw how they move, how they coordinate. Are they still aware? Still human on any level?" I thought about Morris's smile. The way Rodriguez tilted her head. The perfect synchronized climbing in the elevator shaft. "No, sir," I said. "Whatever they were is gone." Reeves nodded slowly. Then he pulled his sidearm, checked the magazine, and handed it to Sarah. "Lieutenant, you're acting security chief until we sort this out. Bannister, that makes you a deputy since you've actually seen these things up close. I need the authentication keys secured immediately. They're in the primary safe. Code is current duty roster plus my authorization." Sarah moved to the massive vault-like safe built into the wall. Started entering the code sequence. The rest of the command staff were moving now, shifting to defensive positions, checking emergency supplies. "Colonel," I said, "what aren't you telling us?" Reeves looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since we'd dropped through the ceiling. "NORAD received a warning 3 days ago. Classified intercept from an observatory in Chile. They'd detected anomalies in the Perseides. Spectral signatures that didn't match normal meteor composition. Organic compounds that shouldn't exist in space." The room had gone silent again. "We were told it was probably a measurement error," Reeves continued. "Faulty equipment. The chances of biological contamination from space were considered statistically negligible. So we did nothing. We kept running normal operations in a facility specifically designed to protect against every threat we could imagine, except the one we didn't take seriously." "You knew," Sarah said quietly. She'd stopped working on the safe. "The Air Force knew something was coming, and they didn't evacuate. We didn't know. We suspected. There's a difference." Reeves's voice had gone flat. And the difference is that evacuation would have required explanations to congressional oversight, media inquiries, public panic. The decision was made at levels well above me that the risk was acceptable given the statistical improbability of actual contamination. They bet wrong, I said. Yes, they did. And now 200 people are infected with alien biological agents inside America's primary defense installation. Reeves's hand was shaking slightly, and I followed those orders. I kept people here, so their blood is on my hands as much as anyone's. Sarah turned back to the safe, finished the code sequence. The door swung open. Inside were the authentication keys, physical keycard devices that served as the final human verification for launch authorization. Without them, the automated systems couldn't proceed beyond preliminary targeting. She pulled them out, held them up. Now what? Now we make sure nobody infected gets these, Reeves said. Even if it means. The lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing everything in red. But in those 3 seconds of absolute darkness, I heard the sound of dozens of hands hitting the blast doors simultaneously from outside. Synchronized, coordinated, waiting. They cut main power, the technician said. We're on backup batteries now. 8 hours maximum. Can they override the blast doors? Sarah asked. Not without command codes, but they could cut through with industrial equipment. Maintenance has plasma torches, diamond blade saws. If they coordinate properly, the technician trailed off. If they coordinated properly, they'd get in eventually. And then it wouldn't matter how many authentication keys we had. We need a plan, I said. Something other than sitting here until the power dies or they cut through. I'm open to suggestions, Reeves said. I looked at Sarah, at the authentication keys she was holding, at the main control panels that connected to every missile silo, every defense system, every fail-safe and protocol that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of scenario. And that's when the really bad idea hit me. What if we don't just defend the systems? What if we use them? Everyone in the room looked at me like I'd suggested setting ourselves on fire. Explain, Reeves said. These infected people, they're coordinated. They move together, they plan together, which means they have to be connected somehow. Biological network. Shared signals. Something. I was making this up as I went, but it felt right in the horrible way that terrible ideas sometimes do. What if we could disrupt that? Override their signals? With what? We don't even know how their biology works. No, but we know what this facility was built to do. Detect and track airborne threats. Coordinate defensive responses. Monitor atmospheric conditions across the entire continent. I moved to one of the dormant tactical stations. The facility's electromagnetic pulse systems. They're designed to protect against external attack, but what if we reverse them? Focus them inward? The senior technician, her name tape said Harrison, stared at me. You want to EMP ourselves. Not the whole facility. Just the infected areas. Shut down their biological network, whatever's linking them together. Even if it's temporary, it might give us a chance to reach the primary communications array, restore outside contact, call for proper containment protocols. That's insane, Harrison said. The EMP systems are designed to shield outward. Reversing them would require manually reconfiguring the primary generators in the sublevel. And even if you could do that, there's no guarantee it would affect biological signals. It might do nothing, or it might kill everyone in the complex. Everyone in the complex is already dead or dying, Sarah said quietly. If we sit here, they eventually get in. If they get the authentication keys. She didn't finish. Reeves looked at the blast doors, at the red emergency lighting, at the tactical displays showing infected personnel surrounding the LCC like a noose tightening. How long would it take to reconfigure the generators? Impossible to say, Harrison replied. I'd need to access the old schematics, figure out the rewiring, physically implement it. Minimum 2 hours. Maybe 4. We don't have 4 hours. They're already working on the doors. Reeves turned to Sarah. Lieutenant, take Bannister. Get to the sublevels. Help Harrison however you can. I'll hold the LCC with remaining personnel. Sir, you're talking about sending 3 people. I'm talking about our only chance to stop this before it spreads beyond the mountain. Those meteor impacts? They happened here because this is a military target. But I've seen the reports. Similar impacts in Russia, China, France, all within 6 hours. This isn't random. It's coordinated. And if it's happening globally, then what we do in the next few hours might be the difference between localized containment and worldwide infection. The weight of that settled over the room like lead. Understood, sir, Sarah said. She handed him the authentication keys. Don't let them get these. I won't. Reeves pulled out his sidearm, checked it again. And if we're still alive in 4 hours, I'll buy first round when we get out. You're buying first 3 rounds, I said. We left through the ventilation duct because the main exits were compromised. Harrison led the way, navigating the crawl spaces with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades maintaining this complex. Sarah followed, then me, each of us carrying emergency tool kits and tactical flashlights. I've been here 23 years, Harrison said as we crawled. Never thought I'd be sabotaging my own systems to create an internal electromagnetic pulse. Did you ever imagine alien microbes controlling personnel? I asked. Fair point. The sublevels were worse than I'd imagined. The meteor impacts had caused structural damage, not catastrophic, but enough to crack walls, rupture pipes, create obstacles where there shouldn't be any. We had to squeeze through collapsed sections, wade through ankle-deep water where a cooling main had burst, climb over fallen ceiling panels. And everywhere, in the darkness, we could hear them moving. Not close, but not far enough. Footsteps in parallel tunnels. Voices speaking in that dual-track harmony. Once, through a crack in the wall, I saw a group of maybe 20 infected personnel just standing in a circle, perfectly still, like they were waiting for instructions that would arrive directly into their rewired brains. Don't look at them, Sarah whispered. Just keep moving. The generator room was sealed behind a blast door that Harrison had to override manually, disconnecting the electronic locks and working the mechanical backup. It took 15 minutes of turning hand cranks and adjusting pressure valves. Every second I expected to hear them coming. To turn around and see gray eyes with black threads staring at us from the darkness. But we made it inside. Harrison sealed the door behind us. The generators themselves were massive, Cold War-era equipment that had been upgraded piecemeal over decades, layers of new technology grafted onto old infrastructure. Harrison immediately started pulling up schematics on a dusty terminal. Okay, she said. This is worse than I thought. The EMP systems are hardwired into the external defense grid. To reverse them, I'll need to physically disconnect the primary conduits, reroute through the backup systems, and recalibrate the pulse generators to fire inward instead of outward, all while maintaining enough power to keep life support running. How can I help? Sarah asked. You can't. I need someone who knows these systems intimately. But you can watch the door, because if they figure out what we're doing and breach this room, none of it matters. So we waited. Harrison worked with the focused intensity of an expert, solving a problem she never wanted to face. Disconnecting cables, running new connections, typing commands into terminals that should have been museum pieces, but were somehow still running critical defense systems. And outside, we heard them testing the doors. Not trying to break in, just testing, pushing, measuring resistance, learning. They know we're in here, I said. Of course they know, Harrison replied without looking up. They probably know exactly what we're trying to do. Question is whether they can stop us before. The lights went out again. Full darkness this time, no emergency backup. They cut power to this section, Harrison said. I could hear her moving in the darkness, the sound of her flashlight clicking on. Doesn't matter. The generators have their own reserves. But it means they're adapting, learning our systems. How long until you're done? 20 minutes. Maybe 30. Something heavy hit the blast door. Once. Twice. They were through testing. Sarah moved closer to the door, weapon raised. Cole, I need you to understand something. If they get through before Harrison finishes, we can't let them stop the reconfiguration. Which means, she didn't have to finish. I understood. Someone would have to hold them off. Probably someone would have to die holding them off. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, I said. It came to that. The door started to glow at the edges after 10 minutes. They were cutting through with something, plasma torch, maybe, or concentrated acid. Whatever it was working. A thin line of red-hot metal appeared along the door seal, spreading like a wound opening. Harrison, Sarah said, voice steady. Status. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. I'm working as fast as. Work faster. The door seal was half cut now. I could see shapes moving beyond it. Dozens of them. Organized. Waiting. And then I saw her. Through the gap in the cutting, I saw Lieutenant Sarah Friel. Not our Sarah, her cousin. The communications sergeant. He was right there at the front of the infected group, his gray eyes with their black threads looking directly at us. Looking directly at Sarah. "Sarah," he said in that terrible dual voice. "You should stop resisting. Integration is inevitable. It's already begun. Can't you feel it? The dust is in every ventilation system. Every breath brings it deeper. You're delaying the unavoidable." "Shut up," Sarah said, but her hand was shaking. "Mom would want you to join us," Sergeant Friel continued. "We saw her. Last year. At Christmas. Remember? She made those dumplings you love. She'd want the family together. Integrated. Forever." "Shut up." The door seal broke. They poured through like water breaking a dam. 20, 30, maybe more. All with those terrible synchronized movements. All reaching for us with fingers that bent slightly wrong. Sarah fired. The first shots hit center mass, dropped 2 of them. But they got back up. Not fast, but they got up because whatever was controlling them didn't care about damaged tissue or broken bones. I grabbed a pipe wrench from Harrison's toolkit and swung at the nearest infected. It connected with a skull, hard enough to crack. The body dropped. The gray eyes still watching. Still coordinated with all the others. 5 minutes, Harrison shouted. 5 minutes might as well have been 5 hours. They kept coming. Sarah kept firing until her magazine emptied, then switched to hand, using her tactical training to create space, to disable limbs, to force them back. But there were too many. They didn't care about self-preservation. They just kept pushing forward with mechanical inevitability. One of them grabbed my jacket. I spun, brought the wrench around, felt it sink into something soft. But there was another one behind that, and another behind that. Hands grabbed my shoulders, my arms. Cold fingers with perfect grip strength. I looked at Sarah. She was surrounded. They had her pinned against a generator housing. Sergeant Friel was moving toward her, reaching out, his hand coming up toward her face. "Cole," Sarah said quietly. "I'm sorry." And she deliberately breathed in. Deep breath, drawing the contaminated air, the microscopic alien dust, directly into her lungs. Infecting herself. Sacrificing herself. To buy time. The infected all paused simultaneously, turned toward her, waiting, watching as one of their own was born. I saw the exact moment it happened. The moment Sarah's eyes shifted from brown to gray. The moment the black threads started moving underneath. 30 seconds, Harrison said. The infected Sarah turned toward me, tilted her head, smiled. But there was something wrong with the smile. Something fighting underneath it. "Run," she whispered. Then louder in that dual-track voice. "Run. Run. Run." And she attacked the other infected. I don't know if it was her fighting the integration, or some kind of interference between the old Sarah and the new programming. But she fought, grabbed her cousin, threw him back, created chaos in their perfect coordination. "Now!" Harrison screamed, and slammed her hand down on the reconfigured control panel. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't like in movies. No visible wave. No dramatic spark. Just a sound like someone ripping fabric, but deeper. Felt through bones. And every infected person in the generator room dropped. Not dead. Just offline. Gray eyes staring at nothing. Bodies twitching sporadically like puppets with cut strings. Including Sarah. She was lying on her back, chest rising and falling, eyes staring straight up. The black threads were still there, frozen like ice crystals. Did it work? Harrison gasped. I moved to Sarah's side, checked her pulse. Still there. Strong. But her eyes weren't tracking. Weren't focusing. I don't know. They're down but not dead. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just that empty stare. "We need to move," Harrison said. The pulse was localized to this section. There are infected throughout the complex who weren't affected. They'll converge on this position once they realize what happened. I'm not leaving her. She's infected, Bannister. She breathed it in deliberately. Even if the pulse disrupted the network temporarily, the biological agent is still in her system. She's gone. I looked at Sarah's face. At the wrong eyes. At the black threads that had replaced her capillaries. Harrison was right. The Sarah I knew was gone. But I couldn't just leave her lying on the floor like broken equipment. "Then we take her with us," I said. "That's not. We take her with us or I don't move. Your choice." Harrison looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Fine. But if she wakes up integrated, you're the one who has to stop her." I got Sarah's arm over my shoulder, supporting her weight. She was dead weight, muscles slack. We moved back through the generator room toward the access tunnel, stepping over the other collapsed infected bodies. My wrist was screaming again, but adrenaline did wonderful things for ignoring pain. The complex was different now, quieter. We could still hear movement, the infected who hadn't been in the EMP radius, but they weren't coordinated anymore. They moved alone or in small groups, confused. The biological network was disrupted. How long will it last? I asked. No idea, Harrison said. Could be minutes. Could be hours. The pulse was designed to disrupt electronics, not biological systems. We got lucky it did anything at all. We made it back to the main corridors. The emergency lights were still red, but power was flowing again. Harrison led us toward the communications array on level 2. The backup systems that could reach outside the mountain if we could just get them operational. We passed Captain Morris in corridor C9. He was sitting against the wall, head tilted at that wrong angle, eyes staring at nothing. As we passed, his head slowly turned to follow us. The black threads in his eyes writhed. Network's rebuilding, Harrison said. They're re-establishing connections. We have maybe 30 minutes before they're fully coordinated again. 30 minutes. Christ. The communications room was a disaster. The meteor impacts had damaged the primary relay systems, and the backup power failures had fried half the secondary equipment. But Harrison moved through it like a conductor leading an orchestra, testing connections, rerouting through damaged systems, calling up diagnostics on terminals that flickered and sparked. I can get maybe 5 minutes of transmission window, she said. Enough to send an emergency beacon and compressed data burst. After that, the system's going to overheat and fail completely. Do it. She typed rapidly, fingers dancing across keyboards that looked like they predated the internet. Who do I address it to? Everyone. Northcom, Stratcom, CDC, who? Anyone who'll listen. The system hummed to life. Harrison pulled up a transmission interface, started encoding our situation: biological contamination, infected personnel, compromised facility, request for immediate military quarantine and containment protocols. Behind us, Sarah made a sound. I turned. She was stirring, head moving slightly. Her eyes were still gray, still threaded with black. But they were focusing now, looking around, looking at me. Cole, she whispered. Still that dual-track voice, but quieter. Struggling. I can still hear them. In my head. They're angry. They know what we did. They're coming. How many? All of them. Everyone integrated. They're converging on this position. 2 minutes. Maybe less. Harrison? Working on it. The transmission system's fighting me. Damage to the primary relays means I have to route through the satellite backup, which requires manual alignment of the 30 seconds or we're dead. Then we're dead. But her fingers kept moving, kept typing, kept rerouting. The door to the communications room shuddered. Something hit it from outside. Hard. Then again. They were here. Sarah struggled to her feet, leaning heavily against a console. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated, fighting whatever was in her bloodstream. You need to go. Take Harrison. Get to the surface. Seal the mountain behind you. Not without you. I'm not me anymore. She looked at her hands. The veins were dark wrong. I can feel it spreading, taking over. In a few minutes I won't be able to fight it. I'll be just like them, integrated, and I'll know everything you're planning, everywhere you'll go. The door was bending. They were using tools now, maybe equipment from the maintenance shops. Cutting through. Transmission's almost ready, Harrison said. 15 seconds. Sarah, go. Her voice broke on the word, human emotion cracking through the alien overlay. Please. Don't let them take you too. Don't let this spread beyond the mountain. The door seal broke. They poured in. Dozens of them. Maybe 50. All with those gray eyes and black threads and synchronized movements that made my skin crawl. I grabbed Harrison's arm. Is it sent? Transmitting now. We ran. Back through the corridors, Sarah's voice behind us screaming at them to stop, to wait, buying us seconds with her own body and will. I heard her fighting. Heard the sounds of struggle. Heard her voice shift from human to that terrible dual harmony as the integration completed, and she became fully theirs. I heard her last scream before she disappeared entirely into the hive. We reached the north entrance shaft, the one that had been compromised by the meteor impacts. It was a disaster zone, collapsed rock and twisted metal, but there was a gap, a path to the surface. They'll follow us out, Harrison said. I know. I pulled out my security tablet, accessed the emergency protocols. But Colonel Reeves gave me override codes. If we can reach surface level, I can trigger the failsafe. What failsafe? The one that seals Cheyenne Mountain completely. Permanent lockdown. 500-ton blast doors that won't open again without presidential authorization. Harrison stared at me. They'll trap everyone inside, including the survivors in the LCC. Survivors who are surrounded by infected personnel in a facility with failing power and compromised life support. They're dead already. They just don't know it yet. Jesus Christ, Bannister. You got a better idea? She didn't. We climbed. The shaft was partially collapsed, full of debris and exposed rock face where the mountain's outer shell had been breached by meteor impact. But it led upward, toward air, toward escape. Behind us, I could hear them coming, not rushing, just climbing steadily, inevitably like water rising. My hands were bleeding. Harrison's were worse. We pulled ourselves up through gaps barely wide enough for human bodies, squeezed past fallen support beams, climbed over rubble that shifted and threatened to give way with every movement. And then I saw stars. Real stars. Not emergency lights or tactical displays. Actual stars through a gap in the mountain's outer face. We pulled ourselves out onto the mountainside, just as dawn was breaking. The Perseids were still visible, trails of light in the pre-dawn sky. Beautiful. Deadly. The tablet, Harrison gasped. Trigger it now. I pulled it out, accessed the failsafe protocols, entered Reeves's override code. The screen displayed a warning. Complete facility lockdown will seal all personnel inside. Emergency override required from 2 separate authorities. I need your authorization code, I said. Harrison hesitated. There are people alive in there. Reeves. The command staff. Who will be dead in hours. The infected will get through eventually. And if they do, if they get the launch codes, if they figure out how to use the systems. I didn't finish. Didn't need to. She entered her code. The mountain rumbled. Deep inside, I heard the massive blast doors closing. All of them. Every entrance, every shaft, every access point. 500 tons of steel and concrete sealing Cheyenne Mountain like a tomb. Sealing Sarah inside. I thought about her face as the integration completed. The moment her brown eyes went fully gray. The black threads consuming everything that made her human. I thought about her deliberately infecting herself to buy us time. I thought about her last human scream. Emergency beacon from Cheyenne, Harrison said quietly, checking her own tablet. Northcom's responding. They're dispatching containment teams. Biohazard protocols. Full military quarantine. Will it matter? If this is happening globally? I don't know. We sat there on the mountainside as the sun rose, watching military helicopters approach in the distance. Behind us, Cheyenne Mountain stood silent. Sealed. A tomb for 200 people who'd just been doing their jobs when space decided to weaponize itself against Earth. Somewhere inside, Sarah was still alive. Still infected. Still part of whatever hive network the alien microbes had created. And I'd locked her in there. You did the right thing, Harrison said. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure there was a right thing anymore. Just terrible choices that bought humanity a little more time. The helicopters landed. Soldiers in hazmat suits poured out, weapons raised, surrounding us. A colonel with CDC insignia approached, keeping a careful distance. Are you infected? I don't know, I said honestly. We were exposed to the facility's atmosphere. If the microbes spread through ventilation like they said, we probably breathed them in. Then you're both under quarantine until we can determine. There's something you need to know, Harrison interrupted. The impacts weren't random. They were coordinated, targeting military installations globally. This isn't a natural meteor shower. It's an attack. The colonel's expression went very still. That's classified intelligence. How do you? Because we just spent 6 hours fighting infected personnel inside America's primary defense installation. Because I've seen what those microbes do to human tissue. And because if you don't get every military facility on the planet under immediate lockdown, you're going to have a lot more mountains full of infected personnel with access to weapons systems. He pulled out a radio, started speaking rapidly into it. Medical personnel moved forward with portable isolation units. I looked back at Cheyenne Mountain one last time. The rising sun painted it gold and red, beautiful against the Colorado sky. No indication of the horror sealed inside. I'm sorry, Sarah, I whispered. The wind carried my words away toward the mountain. Toward the tomb where Lieutenant Sarah Friel would spend however long it took for the infection to burn itself out or for humanity to find a cure. If there was a cure, If humanity survived long enough to look. The isolation unit closed around me, plastic walls cutting me off from the clean morning air. Through the transparent material, I watched them loading Harrison into another unit. Watched the helicopters circling. Watched soldiers establishing a perimeter around the mountain's entrances, sealing the shield that was supposed to protect us. Inside my isolation unit, under the rising sun, I closed my eyes and tried not to think about Sarah's face as the integration completed. Tried not to think about the choice I'd made. Tried not to wonder if I was already infected, if the black threads were already growing behind my eyes, if in a few hours I'd wake up gray-eyed and dual-voiced and part of something that used to be human. The helicopters lifted off, carrying us away from the mountain, carrying the contamination with us. And somewhere inside my skull, just for a moment, I thought I heard voices speaking in perfect harmony. But that was probably just my imagination. Probably.